For as long as humans have existed, some of them could not have children. Not because of modern environmental toxins, not because of sedentary lifestyles or processed food. Infertility existed in prehistoric populations, from structural reproductive abnormalities, from nutritional deficiencies, from infections, from the natural variation in fertility that has always existed across individuals. Somewhere between 10 and 15% of couples in every population ever studied have experienced difficulty conceiving. That figure appears to be relatively constant across time and geography. Which means that in every hunter-gatherer band of 30 to 50 people, there were probably 3 to 7 individuals or couples facing the same experience that approximately 48 million couples face today. They had no fertility clinics, no IVF, no hormone treatments, no diagnostic tools. What they had was each other, a social group, a body of accumulated plant knowledge, and a set of responses that the archaeological and anthropological record has only recently begun to reveal. The conventional assumption is that prehistoric infertility was simply accepted as fate. There was no medical intervention available, so people endured it and moved on. The evidence suggests something considerably more interesting. Human beings are problem solvers. The same cognitive capacity that produced fire, stone tools, and language also produced a systematic attempt to address every biological problem the group encountered, including the failure to reproduce. We know this not from direct prehistoric evidence, which is almost entirely absent on this topic, but from two converging lines of indirect evidence. The first is ethnobotany, the study of how traditional and indigenous cultures use plants medicinally. Across hundreds of traditional societies documented before significant Western contact, researchers have found plant-based treatments specifically intended to address reproductive failure. These treatments are not random. They cluster around plants that modern pharmacology has since identified as containing compounds with genuine effects on reproductive hormones, uterine function, and sperm quality. Traditional societies did not know the biochemistry, but they had accumulated, across generations of observation, a working empirical knowledge of which plants affected reproduction. The second line of evidence is behavioral. Cross-cultural studies of traditional societies consistently find specific social responses to childlessness, responses that are too consistent across unrelated cultures to be coincidental. They appear to be evolved human behavioral patterns, not cultural inventions. Anthropologist Sarah Blaffer HRDY, whose research on cooperative breeding transformed how scientists understand human social evolution, argues that the human species is uniquely characterized by what she calls alloparenting, the raising of children by individuals other than the biological parents. Grandmothers, aunts, older siblings, unrelated group members all participate in childcare in traditional human societies in a way that has no real parallel in other great apes. In this system, childless individuals were not social failures. They were available caregivers, freed from the demands of their own infants and able to invest deeply in the children of others. The ethnobotanical record of fertility treatments is extensive and, in many cases, surprisingly pharmacologically sophisticated. Anthropologist Moorman's database of Native American plant medicine, one of the most comprehensive ethnobotanical records available, contains hundreds of plant preparations specifically used to address reproductive failure, grouped into categories including treatments for female infertility, male infertility, menstrual irregularity, and pregnancy complications. Several of these plants have been subsequently analyzed by pharmacologists and found to contain active compounds with documented effects on reproductive function. Wild carrot Daucus carota seeds have been used as a contraceptive and fertility regulator across multiple traditional cultures in North America, Europe, and Asia. Laboratory research has confirmed that compounds in wild carrot seeds inhibit progesterone synthesis and can interfere with implantation. Traditional use was not random. The plant has real pharmacological effects on the reproductive cycle. Queen Anne's lace, blue cohosh, pennyroyal plants used across traditional cultures for reproductive regulation contain compounds that modern pharmacology has verified affect uterine contractility, hormone levels, or implantation. Traditional healers working without biochemical knowledge had identified, through generations of empirical observation, plants that genuinely alter reproductive function. For male infertility, the record is less extensive but not absent. Ashwagandha, used in Ayurvedic medicine for thousands of years, has been shown in randomized controlled trials to increase sperm count and motility. Maca root, used by Andean peoples for at least 2,000 years, improves sperm parameters in clinical studies. These are not placebo effects dressed up in cultural ceremony. These are real pharmacological compounds, identified and used by traditional societies thousands of years before the biochemistry was understood. Which means that when a prehistoric couple could not conceive, the response was not passive acceptance. It was systematic. The group's accumulated botanical knowledge was applied, remedies were prepared and administered. Outcomes were observed, and the knowledge was refined and passed forward. This is medicine, not modern medicine, but medicine empirical, tested, accumulated over generations, and in many cases genuinely effective. For couples whose infertility could not be resolved through available remedies, the human social system had something that no other primate species possesses to the same degree. A village. Alloparenting, the investment of non-parental individuals in the care and raising of children, is one of the most distinctive features of human social organization. Sarah Blaffer HRDY argues in her landmark book Mothers and Others that human cooperative breeding is the key to understanding why human children require so many years of intensive investment, and why human social groups are so large and so cooperative compared to other great apes. In a hunter-gatherer band, a child's survival depends not just on its mother. It depends on its grandmother, its aunts, older children in the group, and unrelated adults who invest in children that are not biologically theirs. This system creates a specific social role for childless individuals. Ethnographic studies of traditional societies consistently find that men and women without children of their own become disproportionately invested in the children of siblings, cousins, and unrelated group members. The investment is not symbolic. It is practical and substantial: food provisioning, physical care, protection, teaching, and knowledge transmission. Evolutionary biologist David Haig has formalized this as the helper at the nest hypothesis, the idea that in cooperative breeding species, individuals who cannot reproduce directly increase their inclusive fitness by investing in the reproduction of close genetic relatives. In a small band where most members are related, investing in any child's survival advances your own genetic legacy. But the investment often extends beyond kin. Childless adults in traditional societies frequently become the primary knowledge holders and transmitters, the individuals who, freed from the demanding cognitive load of infant care, maintain and pass forward the group's accumulated botanical, ecological, and social knowledge. In the archaeological record, burials of individuals who appear to have been childless, inferred from skeletal age at death and the absence of infant remains in associated burials, sometimes contain grave goods suggesting elevated social status. The childless elder was not necessarily a marginal figure. In some cases, the evidence suggests they held central social roles. Beyond plant remedies and alloparenting, the prehistoric response to infertility had a third dimension that is harder to document but impossible to ignore. Ritual. Every traditional society ever studied has ritual responses to infertility, not as a replacement for practical intervention alongside it. The ritual and the remedy were not in opposition, they were parallel tracks of the same response. In hunter-gatherer societies, the shaman, the ritual specialist, the intermediary between the social group and the forces believed to govern events beyond ordinary control, was a central figure in responses to reproductive failure. Archaeological evidence for shamanic practice extends back at least 30,000 years. Cave paintings that appear to depict figures in trance states, burials of individuals with grave goods consistent with ritual specialist roles, ochre arrangements associated with healing ceremonies. The specific content of prehistoric shamanic practice is lost, but the existence of ritual specialists addressing things the group could not control through practical means is not in doubt. What the ritual provided was not medical intervention. It provided something that medical intervention alone does not, meaning. The experience of infertility in a society where reproductive success is central to individual identity and group continuity is not simply a biological problem. It is an existential one. It generates grief, shame, social anxiety, and a disruption of the expected life narrative. Psychologist Alice DeMar's research on the psychological dimensions of infertility found that women undergoing infertility treatment report levels of anxiety and depression comparable to patients diagnosed with cancer or HIV. The psychological burden is not a modern invention created by medical expectation. It is a response to a loss that is fundamental regardless of the cultural context. Prehistoric humans experiencing infertility were not protected from this burden by living simpler lives. They were facing the same loss with fewer material interventions available. The ritual addressed what the plant remedy could not. It provided communal acknowledgement of the loss, social support for those experiencing it, a framework for understanding why it had happened and what it might mean. And in some cases, a path toward the alternative role, the Alloparent, the knowledge keeper, the elder, that the community needed and that childless individuals were uniquely positioned to fill. The ethnobotanical evidence is real but requires careful interpretation. Traditional plant remedies exist on a spectrum from genuinely pharmacologically active to primarily symbolic. The specific plants with documented reproductive effects are a subset of a much larger body of traditional practice that includes many remedies with no verified biological mechanism. The alloparenting hypothesis as a specific response to infertility, rather than a general feature of human cooperative breeding, is inferred from cross-cultural patterns and evolutionary logic rather than direct prehistoric evidence. We cannot observe prehistoric childless individuals choosing alloparenting roles. The shamanic dimension is the most speculative. The existence of prehistoric ritual specialists is archaeologically supported. Their specific role in responses to infertility is not documented. What is supported by evidence? Traditional plant knowledge with genuine pharmacological effects on reproduction exists across multiple unrelated cultures. Alloparenting is a universal feature of human social organization. Childless individuals in traditional societies consistently take on elevated caregiving and knowledge transmission roles. The specific prehistoric response to infertility was almost certainly some combination of all three. So what did ancient humans do when they could not have children? They applied everything available to them, the botanical knowledge accumulated across generations, the social system that distributed childcare across the group, the ritual framework that gave the experience meaning, and the community that held it together. And when those responses were not enough, when the infertility remained, the human social system did something that no other primate social system does as consistently or as deeply. It found another use for those people, another role, one that the group genuinely needed and that required exactly what childless individuals had to offer: time, attention, accumulated knowledge, and the specific kind of investment that comes from caring deeply about children who are not biologically yours. The prehistoric response to infertility was not just individual endurance. It was a social system absorbing a loss and redistributing what could not be replaced. 48 million couples face this experience today. The medical options are different. The grief is the same, and the ancient responses, community, knowledge, the investment of care in children who need it have not lost their relevance. They have only become harder to find. One question. Did you know traditional plant remedies for infertility have been verified pharmacologically, that ashwagandha and maca root have genuine effects on sperm parameters in clinical trials? Drop yes or no in the comments. And if this gave you something, whether it's personal or just genuinely surprising, hit like. If you want to keep following these origin stories, the real human responses to the things that have always been difficult, subscribe. Next time, something that happens every night, why ancient humans started having nightmares and why yours are still about the same things. See you soon.